Hello. Hi. My name is Phoenix. I used to do this thing where I would read what I'm studying on TikTok, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. So I'm bringing it back, but but it's going to be across more than TikTok. TikTok is not very friendly to me right now, so it's highly likely that I could be banned from TikTok soon. And I haven't even posted much over there. So they really don't like the content, the things that I talk about over there. So we'll see if other places feel the same. So I've been reading a book called The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. It's a really great book. Highly recommend it. But I was reading this section, and I feel like I need to share it. So, this is about a case. The section I'm about to read is about a case in Georgia that the Supreme Court essentially made it impossible to prove racial discrimination on the justice system's part. So I'm going to read it and then I'll talk about it a little bit. So it's going to be a longer video. You might want to hit that 2 times to get through it. Just hold the screen to make it go faster. Or continue on. But this is the kind of stuff that I like to talk about here. First, consider sentencing. In 1987, when media hysteria regarding black drug crime was at a fever pitch, and the evening news was saturated with images of black criminals shackled in courtrooms, the Supreme Court ruled in McCleskey versus Kemp that racial bias in sentencing, even if shown through credible statistical evidence, could not be challenged under the 14th Amendment in the absence of clear evidence of conscious discriminatory intent. On its face, the case appeared to be a straightforward challenge to Georgia's death penalty scheme. Once the court's opinion was released, however, it became clear the case was about much more than the death penalty. The real issue at hand was whether, and to what extent, the Supreme Court would tolerate racial bias in the criminal justice system as a whole. The court's answer was that racial bias would be tolerated virtually to any degree, so long as no one admitted it. Warren McCleskey was a black man facing the death penalty for killing a white police officer during an armed robbery in Georgia. Represented by the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, McCleskey challenged his death sentence on the grounds that Georgia's death penalty scheme was infected with racial bias and thus violated the 14th and 18th Amendments. In support of his claim, he offered an exhaustive study of more than 2,000 murder cases in Georgia. The study was known as the Baldus Study, named after Professor David Baldus, who was its lead author. The study found that defendants charged with killing white victims received the death penalty 11 times more often than defendants charged with killing black victims. Georgia prosecutors seemed largely to blame for the disparity. They sought the death penalty in 70% of cases involving black defendants and white victims, but only 19% of cases involving white defendants and black victims. Sensitive to the fact that numerous factors besides race can influence the decision-making of prosecutors, judges, and juries, Baldus and his colleagues subjected the raw data to highly sophisticated statistical analysis to see if non-racial factors might explain the disparities. Yet even after accounting for 35 non-racial variables, the researchers found that defendants charged with killing white victims were 4.3 times more likely to receive a death sentence than defendants charged with killing blacks. Black defendants, like McCleskey, who killed white victims, had the highest chance of being sentenced to death in Georgia. The case was closely watched by criminal lawyers and civil rights lawyers nationwide. The statistical evidence of discrimination that Baldus had developed was the strongest ever presented to a court regarding race and criminal sentencing. If McCluskey's evidence was not enough to prove discrimination in the absence of some kind of racist utterance, what would be? By a one-vote margin, the court rejected McCluskey's claims under the 14th Amendment, insisting that unless McCluskey could prove the prosecutor in his particular case had sought the death penalty because of race, or that the jury had imposed it for racial reasons, the statistical evidence of racial discrimination in Georgia's death penalty system did not prove unequal treatment under the law. The court accepted the statistical evidence as valid, but insisted that evidence of conscious racial bias in McCluskey's individual case was necessary to prove unlawful discrimination. Let me read that again. The court accepted the statistical evidence as valid, but insisted that evidence of conscious racial bias in McCluskey's individual case was necessary to prove unlawful discrimination. In the absence of such evidence, patterns of discrimination, even patterns as shocking as demonstrated by the Baldus study, did not violate the 14th Amendment. So what does this mean? This means that the Supreme Court said that unless you are overtly racist and you are saying out loud racially charged things, you're not racist. And that's simply not true, because we all know that actions speak louder than words. And the thing about racism is it's mostly unconscious because it's embedded in our system. It is not overt. The KKK is what most people think of with racism, but that's not the majority of racism. The majority of racism is small things, like microaggressions, if you've ever heard that term. So the Supreme Court in 1987, 40 years ago, decided that you cannot fight racism unless it is overt. And that is what I'm fighting here on this channel and all of my other places, is that there is actually covert racism that actually leads our culture here in America. Covert racism is our foundation here. So I need y'all to understand that it is built in our system to be racist. So think about that next time you watch anything, any court case play out on TV. The racism is built into our criminal justice system.